all. Coach Dan Palacios of Kinetic Training here with episode 6 of Kinetic Konnections. I've got a very special guest for you today, the undisputed king of the kettlebell, the original kettlebell master, Steve Cotter himself. Steve, thank you so much for coming out and joining us and sharing your knowledge. You were just speaking about, what it means to you and what you're motivated by. And that's just to help people through movement, through strength conditioning. And I think we share a mindset on that. So Steve, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what you've been up to, man.
Thank you, Dan. And thank you for everyone here. Pleasure to spend this time with you. So, well, what I'm up to is, my life is I bring everything together where my passion is my vocation, is my primary focus, my primary interest, so work, play, family, romance, it's all interconnected, and it's taken me a long time. I'm 51. I turned 51 in January, so it's taken me 5 decades to kind of figure out how to synchronize, but basically what I'm involved in is movement, physical education, to use an umbrella term. My specialization, it derives from the martial arts. So I've been a lifetime martial artist. So lifetime is in, I started my journey when I was 12 years old. So coming up on 40 years. Professionally, for the past almost 20 years, I've been very closely associated with the kettlebell. I've been, teaching kettlebells all around the world. I'm actually the first person, not to talk about yourself like I'm Ricky Henderson in the third person, and
you
Steve
got
does this, but
man, you done the work.
just being transparent and
it's
honest
earned,
about
it's earned, baby. Don't worry.
I was the first guy to start bringing kettlebells around the world back in 2006, and in that time until the great pandemic of 2020 or 2019, depending on what part of the world you're in. That kind of put a hiatus, put a moratorium on the international travel. But between that 15-year period, I physically taught kettlebells in 70 different countries around the world. So every continent with the exception of Antarctica. And, that a lot of time in that. And, now what I'm doing is I'm still teaching. I'm doing everything on Zoom for the most part. And then I'm, my own training. So I'm training my own kettlebell training, my mobility, my jujitsu. So I'm all about physical education. The kettlebell is a tool that is highly useful, has a lot of utility, and it remains so for me. In terms of how I'm using it in my own training, primarily loaded mobility is my primary focus. But I'm still doing some of the kettlebell sport, and obviously we have kettlebell for strength training, and then we have kettlebell for general fitness. And then there's kettlebell for cross training for athletes. So I'm involved in all of that.
So do you have a fully curricularized course as far as how the kettlebell is broken down from, say, someone who's never touched a kettlebell before to someone who's been slinging them around like you have for the last 10 years? And obviously, I can imagine there's plenty to learn for everybody. Do you have a specific course that you're currently pushing out?
Yeah, I have several courses. So my organization that I created in 2008 is called the IKFF, which is the International Kettlebell and Fitness Federation. And the primary focus, there's 3 primary courses that I'm offering through the IKFF. And that's a globally recognized certification program. The primary audience in terms of who it's catering is the fitness profession. So it's for trainers and coaches primarily who are looking to, 1, upgrade their knowledge base, and 2, to be associated with a highly respected professional certification. So I started running certifications back in 2008. Continue to do that, although I'm doing that currently on Zoom. And I have 3 courses there, which are the certification course. I have Kettlebell Level 1, which is called the Certified Kettlebell Teacher, so CKT, Kettlebell Level 2. And then I have a program called CMS, which is Certified Mobility Specialist, and that's body weight mobility. So those are the main courses that I'm offering in terms of fitness pros that want to go very deep. And I teach everything a person needs to know, because it's very honest. To develop skill, we have to practice and we have to become expert, not based on a piece of paper and not based on because we say so, but because we are recognized as such through the body of work. And it's something that takes time. So what I do is, regardless of your level, if you've never touched the kettlebell before, I consider that an advantage, because you're not bringing bad habits into it. On the other hand, if you've been using kettlebells for some time, more than likely, there's going to be things that I'm going to refine that's going to just bring your program to the highest level, you know, or to, I should say, to the next levels for you, how far you're going to take that. And so those courses are structured as 1-day intensives. And then there's a process where the student has to earn the level. So it's not one of these things where you just pay your money, show up, and you leave certified. Not at all, because I take too much importance in the work that I do. You have to earn it through competency. So there's a testing procedure, there's a hands-on, you know, and I give some time for that. You know, I give actually 3 months from the completion of the course. So level 1 is mastery of single kettlebell fundamentals. Level 2 is mastery of double kettlebell fundamentals. And in addition, the most important variations in terms of how we're manipulating the kettlebell in different positions. And then the CMS, Certified Mobility Specialist, is just based upon your body and movement. And in that, I'm presenting big ideas, because the idea of mobility is even more diverse than kettlebell. You know, so there's no limit to what we can do in terms of the use of the physicality. And so my focus, rather than let's drill, you know, these techniques as if I'm identifying the most important techniques, rather it's big ideas that integrate with whatever we're doing in life and in movement and in fitness and in training. First and foremost being breathing. Okay, so identify the universal qualities that everybody does. And even in the kettlebell, it's not universal, because not everybody is going to do kettlebell, and not everybody should do kettlebell. It's going to be contraindicated in many different cases. But the global universal is breathing, because regardless of where we are, whether we're the elite best athlete in the world to you're a paraplegic and you can't even function on your own, and everyone in between, we all breathe. Okay. And there's nothing else that every single person around the world is doing right now other than that. Okay. Because
man, breathing is, I mean, certainly with like the breath belt and all that I've learned going through that process of working with those guys and figuring that out. I mean, just on breathing alone and the right breathing technique at the right time, that can help you totally relax and shift from, you know, sympathetic dominance to parasympathetic state, and just getting your mind into a more objective state versus utilizing that fight or flight mode at just the right moment, getting that shot of adrenaline, and then boom, breathing to get that extra shot of power. What have you seen has that you've been able to integrate with your kettlebell work from the breath work world to get more out of your kettlebell performance? Because I mean, you must have known the kettlebell for a very long time. At what point did you discover those breathing techniques, and what are those techniques that you've applied?
Well, it's actually the other way around, because my background, as I mentioned it, when I was 12 years old, I started in martial art training, but specifically what my early martial art training was internal martial arts. So this is referred to as Taoist yoga sometimes. And always associated with the Chinese martial arts, but specifically the internal martial arts is the art of Qigong. And, Qigong literally would translate, well, loosely translates as breathing skill. It can also translate as energy mastery, but there's an ancient body of knowledge associated with the Chinese martial arts called the Qigong. I was exposed to that, starting at 12 years old. And so I've always been integrating breathing training and breathing focus into everything I'm doing, first through the Chinese martial arts, and then later the kettlebell and fitness, and then in the last 3 years, back to the tradition, to the jujitsu with the Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Along the way, I've met impactful individuals. I've met teachers and innovators, which has caused me to look closer, because anything you've been doing for a long time, at some point it becomes automated, and you may not have a lot of consciousness, whereas
you're just working.
Yeah, in the dedicated practice, it's just like an inhale here, exhale here, right? Or
Right.
I'm holding a meditative posture, and okay, I'm breathing along the meridian. So there's this very in-depth Taoist. The Buddhists have as well, but my background comes more from the Taoist meditations, and so the integration of meditation with martial arts, and then the Qigong sort of being that interim. And everyone's familiar in some level with Tai Chi. Tai Chi is the most popular form of Qigong around the world.
Right.
And so the kettlebell was sort of another, we could say, milestone when I started learning about the kettlebell. But the caveat to that is not at first, because when I first learned kettlebells, it was, early 2000s. My first kettlebells, 2001, 2002, just when it was just starting as a market, in Pavel, and it was, RKC. It wasn't until almost a decade later that the Russians actually came onto the scene. And that, so the breathing mechanics, initially, it was pretty standard, power breathing, Valsalva maneuver. But then when I became familiar with the high-level Russian training, going to Russia, meeting, world champions, champion coaches, the Russians, better than, more than any other nation, has integrated the sports science. And my perspective, and as a world traveler, I have different ideas about cultural integration. But my view is, you have your East, the Chinese, the Japanese, and it's very traditional, very ancient. A lot of it is anecdotal, like, why, master, am I doing it this way? Well, because we've been doing it this way for 5,000 years.
It works.
Thank you, master. Right. Whereas the West is very, if it's not in a peer-reviewed journal, then it doesn't count.
Right.
So much fixated on.
The funny thing is, we're just now catching up.
Where's the science?
We're just now catching up.
And I'm not going to believe what I see in front of me that's obvious, because the science hasn't validated it yet.
Right.
And the Russians are somewhere in the middle. The Russians are like in the middle of the East and the West, where they care about what works, and they have the tradition, they have the intuitive, they have the sort of feeling, but they also are extremely scientific and are testing, and when it comes to sports science, most of the leading minds that, in US and North America, they're trained in the Soviet system at some point, so there's nothing new, we're just kind of regurgitating things that have been around. So you look at the Butenko method, which is a major breathing study, Dr. Butenko, that's been integrated with the kettlebell sport for a long time. So when I started understanding more about the precision of the breathing and integrated with the endurance and the weighted endurance, which is what the kettlebell is, the power endurance, where you have a resistance and you need to stabilize the heart rate.
Right.
Because if kettlebell sport traditional is 30 minutes, but then there can be marathon. Kettlebell sport traditional is 10-minute set. So one set, 10 minutes, not putting it down.
Right.
And then there's marathon. It can be 30-minute, half marathon, 1 hour marathon, and you can go beyond.
It's a long time to hold a piece
in any case, it's a long time. And so, but you have a weight, so the heart rate wants to accelerate. And if you have to become a master of your breathing, because you have to be able to regulate the heart rate so that you can sustain that aerobic. Because if you switch into the anaerobic and now you have the oxygen debt, and that's not sustainable, so you got to stop.
Right.
But what if you can't stop? What if stopping means you die? Well, now you got to figure a way to continue, and that's where the breathing comes into play. So, you know, the Qigong, my foundation, the kettlebell, it got me to understand the application for power endurance training specifically. And then about three years ago, I had a chance to interact and meet and hang out with Wim Hof.
Ah.
And so that was impactful because of what he's doing. And, you know, we talk about breath work now, it's almost commonplace, at least people hearing about it and talking about it, which is, it's great. And it's also kind of funny and ironic because it's never been away. It's always been there. But
right. Well, it's becoming the new fad, right?
You know, Wim Hof deserves rightfully the credit. He's the guy that made breathing sexy again. He's the guy that made breathing interesting and cool. And now we have many, many things, you know, just in the kettlebell. Pavel is the guy that created the market, you know, and so all these amazing innovations and refinements that have occurred, it wouldn't have happened. You know, there wouldn't be all these other programs where, you know, so Wim Hof was very impactful in what he's doing with the cold, you know, with the ice and the cold and the breathing. And obviously it's a pranayama based yoga system, you know, and then you have, you know, you have a lot of other programs. Since then, I am currently training Oxygen Advantage with Brian Mirabella in New York City. He's excellent. Bry Beast is his Instagram handle. Obviously, that's the work of Dr. Patrick McNown, which is, again, a modern interpretation and sort of a refinement on the Butenko method once again. So, so that's an overview. And, you know, and there's a lot of, but anything related to breathing, I'm interested in. There's many techniques, but yes, I very much agree with the Oxygen Advantage point of view. A lot of it makes sense. And that's what I'm currently focused on in my daily practice, is integrating, you know, so we're talking about the mouth is for eating, the nose is for breathing. Right. We're exhaling a little bit more than we're inhaling, and we want to take, you know, small breaths, short breaths. And those are kind of the overview of the Oxygen Advantage system. And training that, obviously there's breath hold techniques in there. There's control, the control pulse, the control rate, and the you know, the heart rate and heart rate variability. So we're looking at these different things and how the breath is integrated. But whatever spoke in the wheel that we're coming in on, it all leads to the same place. And that is that, you know, breathing is the first and the last. And absolutely, as Brian says, breathing is the new strength training.
That's going to be it.
Yeah. So you want your last breath to be a smooth and calm, controlled breath, you know, and in between as much as possible, because anytime we're in a scenario where we're holding or that's, we need to be able to regulate. And absolutely, that's true for martial arts. It's true for life, relationships, and conversations, and sports performance, and whatever we're talking about. Is if we're with our breath, then we're present. Absolutely. And, you know, I integrate it, you know, now with sports, and especially a sport like kettlebell that is extremely intense, meaning your heart rate is going to be above maximum heart rate at certain times if you're really working. You're going to be exhaling through the mouth, just out of necessity, because at some point the oxygen exchange ratio, you're not getting there. Yeah, you're just trying to make it. Create a larger passageway. You need to be forceful. So in theory, we want to breathe through our nose, but in practice, in certain intense things, we may be exhaling through the mouth. You know, and so for me, it's lifestyle, it's philosophy, as well. We want, there's this cliche that a lot of times it's been associated with martial arts and Eastern mysticism, but there's this idea of mind, body, and spirit. We hear about that. And so what I like to teach is mind, body, breath. It's the integration of mind, body, breath. And now we're very clear. There's no confusion about what we're speaking about and what the objectives are, because we know what the body is, and that's the frame with we exist within, which we exist within. Excuse my tongue tying there. There's the mind, which we have a general idea of what that is, even though we may not be able to touch it in the same way. But the mind, we can agree that it relates to consciousness.
Yeah.
Okay. It relates to consciousness and awareness and our thought processes. We talk about spirit. Well, now we're getting very far away from any consensus on what that is, right? Does it have a name and so on? So the spirit, well, the breath is the tool that the tangible tool we have to work with. So what I say is that the mind and the body, the breath harmonizes the mind and the body. The breath is the tool which we connect the movement with the intention. And this is mindful practice, this is presence, and this applies into everything that we're doing in life, which enables us to achieve success.
Well, certainly there's a major physiological connection of the breath and all of the different impact it has on your physiological system to getting your mind to a place where you can function sensibly again, right? That
Yes.
relationship between that parasympathetic and sympathetic dominance shifting from one state to the other. I deal a lot with tactical athletes. I work with the Broward Police Academy down here, and I've spoken with several other, high-level operators, guys like Lam from Ronin Tactics, T-Mac from his company, the University of Badassery. And it seems like everybody kind of has that same understanding who's been in that world and understands what it's like to have to control your body in an extreme situation. And one of the most common themes that I hear from everybody for not only pulling them out of that, tunnel vision type mindset and mode when they are in the extreme and they are focused on their target is their breath. And the same thing applied to getting them to transition from high-level military operator life to civilian life now, where now I don't need to be hyper-focused all the time on this target. And it was their breath work that brought them back to that more stabilized state in many instances, in many cases. And so, yeah, I mean, there's anecdotally one of those things that when you do it and you practice it consistently and start to understand the impact it actually does have on your mind, breath work is one of those things that you can't ignore, does have a major impact on your performance as not only an athlete, but also just as a human being. Being able to carry a conversation with someone and the way the world is these days, we often don't agree, right?
Yeah.
But being able to stop, process that information, take a breath, and respond in a sensible and amicable way is often one of the better ways to go about it, I would say. But I think that's something more people should know about.
We don't have to always be fight and flight mode,
right?
There is the ability to be at ease. And totally agree with that. And, and I also should mention breath belt as being a significant, you mentioned that, at the beginning. The breath belt is a fantastic tool that integrates that. Now we have a tool that now it's strength training for power athletes, strength athletes. And then it's also rehabilitative where, okay, there's pain in my body. I have instability and, soreness. So
or lack of awareness, a lot of right, just lack of awareness. I think that's one of those areas. With the kettlebell, right? These guys come in slinging the kettlebell around for 15 years, and then you're over here going, okay, how could you be aware when you're always on the inside looking out, right?
Yeah.
It does take a lot of times, in many cases, an extra tool or an extra set of eyes, right? A coach is just another tool in the end, right? And I say that in the most positive terms possible.
That's right,
Coach is
because we're
just
not
another
doing the
tool,
work, we're
they're there
providing
to
the,
give you that extra look, that extra refinement. And something like the breath belt or a kettlebell could be very well be that thing that someone identifies with at such a level, like you did when the first time you picked it up. I'm sure it was just this nice experience or this exciting experience, and it became your life's work. I
true.
think I tend to be the guy that likes to go out of my way to find all of these different tools and find fun, interesting ways to integrate them. But you've specialized in the kettlebell and used
Well,
many
it's
different tools
interesting
over the
that
years, you know?
those things come to me. I'm an early adapter, and because, kettlebell wasn't the first time or the last time, just as you seek out this what's next, and but what's common is we both are interested in the relentless pursuit of better.
That's it.
And so there's no dogma associated, because if you can show me a better way, I'm going to pay attention and I'm going to adapt it once I understand it. I'm going to look at it and be like, okay. And then once it makes sense, now I have no problem changing. I was doing it this way for the last 20 years. You just gave me a piece that I was missing. And now, hey, it's better with that. Well, now I'm going to do it like this.
Just
so the ability to
process.
reinvent and innovate, and so I was an early adapter in several things in terms of our mutual friend, David Weck, or Weck Method is, so anyone that's not familiar really ought to look at Weck Method, because Weck Method is really, in terms of innovation, a level deeper of understanding of human biomechanics, and that relates to all movement, gait, function, right?
Second look,
and that
the layers and going a little deeper. Yeah.
Yeah, so David Weck, he built this platform based on an invention that was, really it was a home run in a real sense of the word, like anyone in the fitness space. Yeah, it's probably the biggest home run in, aside, if you take away brands in terms of a product, CrossFit is a more impactful brand in terms of, money in the bank. But as a single tool, you have just a couple things: kettlebell, BOSU. The BOSU is a massive seller, and it still sells around the world, because every gym, every therapist, and many homes.
There's
and
barbells, dumbbells, bands, and BOSU balls.
Yeah,
and
so
kettlebells.
exactly. And some people don't like it, or they don't understand that it's a tool for strength training. They think it's just a silly thing that, unstable surface, whatever. But that's not my responsibility to make that argument. But when David was cutting those Swiss balls in half and duct taping, stapling, glue them to a wood base, that's when I was started working with David, before it was even a product, and so I saw that innovation as it came in. We're talking about the turn of the 21st century, so 2000, right? The idea world, right? The big mainstream fitness event in Ursa and these, big shows. Hey, come try this out, stand on it, jump on it. So for a period of a couple of years there, I was really going deep into the training of balance training and looking in that. And that was really starting to have a very big impact in sort of the functional fitness space at that time. You had a lot of products coming out. You had, your AirX pad and your Dynadisc and all these, wobble boards. But this was a unique product that had different, so I was an early adapter in that. And then the kettlebells came on the scene a couple of years after that. I was one of the first guys to say, hey, what's this? And, and that has continued, and more recently now we have Landmine University, and that's just starting, and so
Alex Canellis.
Right. So I'll be going to his course in about 2 weeks from now, and that's something where we'll look back in several years and everyone's going to be like, of course, like they're going to remember the time.
Why weren't we doing more of this sooner?
Right. And, there's people listening and say, oh, I know what Landmine, okay, yes. But he's using it in a unique way and teaching it in a unique way that goes beyond
specific application. Yeah.
One rotational exercise. And understanding what he's done is he's applied Weck Method principles, coiling core, because he understood it on the deep level, and applying it to strength and power development for athletics in a forward direction. And life is moving forward, not up and down, right?
It's
so
amazing
again,
how
early adaptation, because I have the ability to recognize, okay, this is a piece that is going to add value to the overall game. And then it's just integrating the different things that I like to do and I've gained benefits. So, you know, when I got involved in kettlebell and I started bringing kettlebells around the world, and I did my first big program in 2005, which was the Encyclopedia of Kettlebell Lifting. And, you know, it's martial arts. It's martial arts. It always has been. So I was a martial artist, seeing the kettlebell as a tool, as an extension of the hand, and highlighting skills and concepts of the martial art, because there's stance, there's linkage, there's connection to the ground, there's integration of the movement with the breathing. And, you know, how are we applying it for different scenarios, framing, structure, you know. And it took me many years until I could look back and realize that was what was happening. I wasn't aware while it was formulating, but essentially I created my own martial arts system via the kettlebell. And then after
weaponizing it.
Yeah, after close to 20 years of that, I found my way back to the formal martial arts again 3 years ago with the jiu-jitsu. You know, I started out with the Chinese martial arts, kind of moved away and went into the fitness space, and then I came back to the martial arts. And that's when I was able to look back and see that you've always been doing martial arts, you know, because the jiu-jitsu guys, they were following me anyway, and they were seeing it as a martial art, and they were, you know, but I wasn't doing the jiu-jitsu back then, right? You know, and so it was that integration. And, you know, that's what I do, and that's what I love to do. And it fits life, it fits time, because I'm 51 years old. I feel great. I can perform at a high level. I'm still, you know, training very intensely on a daily basis, you know, jiu-jitsu and fighting beast all the time. And I love that, but there's a reason. There's a reason why I'm doing that at 51, because first of all, I didn't injure myself in my 20s and 30s doing stupid crap. And second of all, homeostasis, and we find that balance where, you know, so my goal now, even with the kettlebell, it's not about the kettlebell. It's about how can I use the kettlebell to enhance what's the more important for me. It's the martial art, right? Because it's fight or flight. Those are our fundamental, you know, and if you look at the psychology, there's also freeze and there's fawn, but those are negative things. You don't want to freeze. You want to either fight or flight. You don't want to just do nothing. Okay. Right. But so we're talking about fight and flight as our sort of base ancestral instincts of survival, which has allowed humanity to continue the story.
Prime and prepare. How about utilizing the kettlebell for prime and prepare? If you're ready, then you can get the jump on them, right?
Exactly. You are primed for the fight. You are primed for the flight. Exactly. So that these are the training methods.
You don't have to get ready if you stay ready.
That's right. That's right. And if you don't lose your breath, you don't have to catch your breath.
That's it.
So, you know, it's, for me now, it's okay. Everything I'm doing in training, it's either going to make me more effective at fight or it's going to make me more effective at flight. If it doesn't offer that, I have no use for it because it's not useful, you know. And so now it's mobility is more important for me at 51 years of age, in the sense that the priority is not lifting the heaviest weight that I can lift, or even necessarily doing as much repetition as I can do. The priority is to be pain-free first, and with that, pain-free is to be able to be unrestricted in my movements. In other words, my body can do what I ask it to do, what I need it to do, or if it can't, it's a skill that I can still learn and I can practice. There's no restriction preventing me from participation,
Right.
So in that, mobility is now the priority. And so now the kettlebell is a very useful tool for loaded mobility, so that, yes, mobility is interesting, but that's homeostatic, because, you get up out of bed, you walk across the room, you go to the bathroom, you walk in your car, you get in your car. That's mobility. That's not enough. I want to be powerful in my mobility. So I want a little bit more than just, okay, move the body. And so that's what I call the loaded mobility. And so now the kettlebell allows me to stack the bones in a neutral position. I don't have to hold it the way I would have to hold other weights. It can just hang on my frame. And so, that's something that I really am focused on now with the kettlebell that I love. But, still, I've been teaching for so many years. There's the classical kettlebell. You have to start with that. It's the swing, the clean, the press. You learn those foundations, but then you have, freestyle. And we're in the era and age of flow. And that's a good thing, right? You have flow this and flow that. And the fact that we're talking about
foundation and structure first.
Exactly. Because, and it ties into the breathing, because when you're breathing, you're flowing with the breath. And now the breath is with the movement. Now you're flowing with the movements. And it's nice to see, and you see it with Mace, and you're seeing with kettlebell, and you're seeing with Animal Flow. Well, that's a brand, and, he's very good at what he's doing, but it's like, oh, flowing this and flowing that. A lot of what people are practicing calling flowing, in my opinion, is not flow. And there's a distinction. What it is, and it's not a criticism, it's just a point of discussion to consider. Because if I do a routine, and maybe my routine is 5 movements or 6 movements, let's say it's body weight, and I'm calling it, let's say, Animal Flow or Ground Flow or something like that. Animal Flow is a brand name. I'm not talking about that brand,
right.
Because I respect Mike very much. He's great at what he's doing. I'm saying the idea of, just, okay, I'm moving around on the ground and I'm doing these 5 or 6 movements together. Well, what's happening is you're learning individual techniques, and then you're connecting them through transitions, and you're stringing them together, and then you're practicing. That's fluid. It's not flow. Because the nature of flow, it's never the same twice.
Randomization.
And you don't know what you're going to do until you're doing it, because there's no preconceived.
Improvised, yeah.
Right. It's action reaction. And that is what I define as flow. And so, routines and stuff is good, but if you practice these 6 moves and you get good, first you're just practicing the basics. It's like kettlebell. Swing, right? Clean, press. Now I can start, doing combos with it. But if you've never seen it, you see this fluid. But if you know it, it's just one technique, and now we're connecting, and it looks like
the dots between
one
them.
Extravagant thing, but it's not. And, the same is true with these body weight flows and the Mace. And so if it's just a routine, then it's a fluid routine, and the observer is going to say it's flow. But the mentality is where the flow has to be integrated, because the flow at the highest level is such that the muscle memory, your body is so trained that there's no
knows what to do in
differentiation
response
between
to
thought
certain
and action.
vectors. Yeah.
And it's in the moment, and it's going to depend on the force that is coming in is going to be the force that's coming out.
Right. Equal and opposite.
Yeah.
But,
so it's just a little bit of ideas about flow, because we see that so much, and I like to go deep when we start talking about things. Let's go really into that, and let's understand, what does it really mean, and how can we really use it? And so I guess the message is, don't be limited in your flow practice by just memorizing someone else's routine that they taught you. That's fine. That's a foundation. But first, learn the basic techniques and master those. Now, second, figure out how you can string them together. Third, follow along with someone that has more experience, but later you're creating your own flows. And that's really the flow, is it's yours and mine is mine.
Find the flow of your own force, right? So
yeah, because otherwise we just have replicas. It's like soldiers in an army. You're all doing the same movement. Well, it looks very fluid. That's because it's very well rehearsed.
The creative essence of movement and the ability of the body to do that is tremendous. So Steve, thank you so much for coming out and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you, Dan.
I'm excited to go ahead and drop the linkage for your Instagram as well as your website, which is IKFF.com, correct? And,
exactly.
And I really appreciate you coming out to drop all the knowledge of, you know, the philosophy behind Kettlebell, the programs that you've designed, and just your mindset and experience with everything that you've done in the fitness industry. You've made a huge impact on my own career, and I hope to make sure to share your information with anyone I come across. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us here on Kinetic Konnections. We're going to have Steve Cotter's information available for you to go ahead and follow him on Instagram, see his website, and check out some of the most amazing kettlebell programs that I've ever seen in my 10 years as a strength coach. We'll see you next time, y'all. Live kinetically.